What is up? We are Wrestling Maniacs out there worldwide. I'm the host with the most, the best one, Donnie, here with...
What is going on, everybody? Danny Huckins here, man. 1/3 of We Are Wrestling, as you guys can tell. It's only me and Donnie today on this extra. But Donnie, man, it is officially Elimination Chamber Day. I can't wait, bro. I'm so excited.
I am very excited, and this week's episode of the We Are Wrestling podcast, we had a 1-year anniversary show. We talked about, some of our favorite moments within the 1 year, because in case the We Are Wrestling Maniacs don't know, exactly today, February 18th, 2022 is the first time it was you, me, and Ben on the We Are Wrestling talk show, which now we made the announcement that it is the We Are Wrestling podcast. New episodes will be every Saturday. And because of, doing a special, we didn't cover any wrestling news, which is why there is some, extras here on the We Are Wrestling channel covering the wrestling news for this week. But if you're not a We Are Wrestling Maniac yet already, and you're not a part of the thousands of subscribers, the best way to support us is by hitting that subscribe button now, turning on the post notifications. Videos be coming out of nowhere like an RKO. And of course, you already know, the grind is real. And I felt like this was, a perfect time to do an extra, because the wrestling news has been, pretty crazy the last couple days. And there's some things that we can definitely talk about before the Elimination Chamber, which, by the way, to the We Are Wrestling Maniacs watching this before the Chamber, we will be doing a live watch along, 7:45 Eastern Standard Time. If you are looking to watch the pay-per-view with somebody, we'll be watching it. Me, Danny, and Ben. Unfortunately, old school Chaz is not around today. But with that being said, what do you want to talk about first, Danny?
I say we dive into this Kenny Omega thing, because this news is pretty crazy. It came out a day or so ago, and apparently Triple H, I don't know how this came out, but somebody close to him said that he was interested in bringing in Kenny Omega from AEW.
This report was from Fightful.
It's from Fightful. So I don't know if it was an interview. I don't know if somebody close to him, overheard something and they, obviously went to the dirt sheets. But that's kind of insane, man. And a lot of people on social media are, bagging on a lot of different podcasters in the community, because people are saying that if Kenny Omega leaves AEW is pretty much one foot in the grave. And what a lot of people don't realize is Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, they are AEW. That's why they're EVPs. And, guys like, obviously, AEW has a stacked roster. They have Moxie, they have Jericho, they have, a lot of these guys, man. Claudio. They're not going to be wrestling forever, man. Sooner or later, they are going to leave. They're going to do other things. They're going to retire. Some may go back to WWE at some point. Who knows? Anything is possible. So it's just crazy, man. Do I see Kenny Omega leaving though? I mean,
before we get into that, I want to give my overall, thoughts on the background with this news coming out. It is not 100% confirmed Kenny Omega to WWE. We want to clarify that. Fightful, what they said in the reports is that WWE think they have a serious shot at landing Kenny Omega when his AEW contract expires, which I know there was reports a few months ago saying that his contract was up sometime in 2023, but with him being on the shelf for almost a year, that does add time to his contract situation. Yep. So we really don't know when his contract's going to expire. We know the Young Bucks sometime in 2024, but with Kenny Omega, to WWE, I think that, this is some really cool discussions in the wrestling community, because, of course, Kenny Omega, he started AEW just like, Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks and Hangman Adam Page and Chris Jericho and Jon Moxley. But we've seen Cody Rhodes transition from AEW to WWE and have a very successful run so far. And the one thing Cody Rhodes did not want to do was turn heel. And he proved that, by going to WWE, he didn't have to be a heel to get over. and
Yeah.
he has, been one of the top baby faces in WWE. And because of Cody Rhodes going from AEW to WWE, that opens the door and pretty much says anybody can make this transition. We've seen a lot of WWE talent go from, NXT to AEW, or even, had a short run on the main roster like Keith Lee, and then, got released, a part of the budget cuts, and went on to AEW. So anything
Yeah.
is possible. And on the We Are Wrestling Talk Show, we love to talk about fantasy booking and, make these predictions and create these conversations in the wrestling community, because let's be real. If we just, put this under the rug, Kenny Omega to WWE, like, what's the fun in that?
Exactly, man. And I mean, here's a little bit more of my take on this whole entire situation, because like Donnie said, it's not confirmed. Nothing is confirmed. Anybody can say anything at this point. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. But Kenny Omega, like, I feel like he's a little. The circumstances around him are a little bit different. One, his career is his career and the Young Bucks career are sort of intertwined with each other. You know what I mean? So if Kenny Omega does go, I don't see him going without the Young Bucks. They're just so like, if they had a house together and all their families lived under one roof, it wouldn't surprise me one bit. Like, they're just intertwined with each other. You know what I mean? Kenny
And
Omega is also the head of AEW's video game division.
And that's the thing that people have to understand as well. Kenny Omega and, the Young Bucks, the Elite, they're more than just a wrestling faction. They're best friends. They've been doing this for years, traveling from the United States to Japan and, taking over the independent circuit and creating All Elite Wrestling.
Exactly.
So
So
now, Danny, how do we feel about Kenny Omega to WWE? Do you see this happening?
do I see it happening? No. Can it happen? Possibly. I know Kenny Omega had an interview. He had an opportunity to go to WWE, but he had very little interest in doing so. Now, could that change over time? Yes. There's just a lot of other factors that you have to think about before something like this happens. I mean, he has a lot of free time in AEW. He has other things to do outside of pro wrestling. Like I said, he's a EVP for AEW. He, has other ventures that he does. The Young Bucks and him, they have their YouTube vlog or whatever.
And don't forget, Kenny Omega is also wrestling in New Japan Pro Wrestling too.
And Kenny Omega is also the head of AEW's video game division. Majority of Fight Forever, that was developed with Kenny Omega right there, fucking going over everything. You know what I mean? So he was a huge part in the video game. I feel like if he left AEW and goes to WWE, he's just gonna be a wrestler. That's it. He's they're not gonna think of him as anything else. They're not gonna like give him special treatment just because he's Kenny Omega. Cody Rhodes, I feel like, was a different situation because Cody Rhodes' entire family and his career was wrapped up in WWE way before, there was a AEW or any of that. You know what I mean? So I feel like the circumstances are a little bit different.
And that's the thing too. Cody's story, isn't finished, because Dusty never held a WWE championship, and that gives you like that reason why Cody Rhodes is there. Because from the get-go in AEW, he had a match with Chris Jericho for the AEW World Title in the early days. I believe it was at, I think, Full Gear. And, if Cody Rhodes loses, he can never go for the AEW World Championship. And then MJF screws him and pretty much betrayed, the Cody roller coaster, and pretty much created that feud. And I do think that it is a different situation with both Kenny Omega and Cody Rhodes. You're absolutely right. But I do see Kenny Omega making this transition from AEW to WWE. And the reason why I see this happening is because of the success Cody Rhodes is having right now from the transition, because I think this is a similar situation going on with Kenny and the Young Bucks. The more talent that are coming into AEW, those CM Punks, Adam Coles, Bryan Danielsons, they are starting to get lost in the shuffle, which is why you're seeing them, be the trio championships and, do these trio tag matches. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Kenny and the Young Bucks are having a fun time doing it. But let's be real, Kenny Omega, the way that he was booked going for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship and, the way he was booked in New Japan Pro Wrestling as the special attraction, it's been missing ever since he joined AEW. And I think in WWE, at first, here's the thing, the only way you're going to be able to have Kenny Omega debut in WWE is in front of a pay-per-view crowd, because that's where the hardcore fans are. If you put him on a random Raw or SmackDown with vignettes and stuff, it's not going to work. Has to be a pay-per-view. And I just think with Kenny Omega, just being realistic here, the man's 39 years old. He's never competed in a match at WrestleMania, and that's something that WWE has over AEW. They are, more people, more eyes are on the WWE product than AEW. And I think that there's things that any professional wrestler out there in the world wants to do. And unfortunately, AEW, they don't have a WrestleMania. They don't have, friggin' Patrick Mahomes holding their friggin' world championship.
I definitely understand where you're coming from. But I also want to bring up this point, right? To us, we think about every single day. We think about pro wrestling. We think about the storytelling aspect. We think about the in ring aspect. We pretty much live and breathe this. You know what I mean? Which is why we spend so much of our time talking about it. We love this sport. We're passionate about what goes on in that ring. So I would consider us, me, you, and Ben, diehards. Like, we're diehard pro wrestling fans through and through.
We are wrestling maniacs, Danny.
A lot of WWE audiences are just casual fans. I guarantee you, put Kenny Omega on Monday Night Raw or, a pay-per-view, Smack, whatever it is. I guarantee you, maybe 25% of the audience is going to know who the fuck it is. Just because outside of AEW, he's never been on a huge platform.
And you see here's what I want to add to that too. You're absolutely correct, because if you look back at some debuts from guys that, came from
Bronson Reed, he was a huge star in fucking New Japan before he came back to WWE. I think he was only one of six guys or whatever that beat Okada or whoever the fuck that was in New Japan. Yeah. Like, he was a huge star, and now he gets little to no reaction. Continue.
You make a great point, and that's what I wanted to get into, because we've seen the transition wrestlers from WCW to WWE. DDP was one of them. It didn't work out. He was a lot hotter in WCW than WWE. But then there was guys like Chris Jericho, who, made that transition, had a great debut. But at first, he wasn't connecting with the audience. He, couldn't get used to the WWE style of things. And through time, he adapted and he evolved. And I think if you are, according to, PWI Top 500, the number one professional wrestler in the world, and I think Kenny Omega can adjust to WWE, but I think a lot of fans, when they see him debut, the pay-per-view is going to be great. But then he's going to get lost in the shuffle for a little bit. And a lot of people, I think, are going to overreact and pretty much be like, oh, Kenny should have never left. And then, a year from then, if they, book him properly and they do everything right, like they did with Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, could be a big star in the business, I think.
But back then when Jericho debuted, 1999, WWE was at an all-time high, bro. They were getting like 15 million views.
Well, I have another good example too.
You know what I mean? I just like, if Kenny Omega wants to make if Kenny Omega wants to make the jump, fucking phenomenal. We're gonna see where he goes. We're gonna see how he does this. I don't see him come. If he comes, he's bringing the Young Bucks. The Young Bucks were not going to be in AEW, and he's going to be on WWE. That's not.
And that's the thing too. You have to realize the Young Bucks, they have not wrestled a WrestleMania match. They have not been on the big stage before. They've done, work in TNA wrestling. They've done work in Ring of Honor, New Japan Pro Wrestling, and AEW. and nothing compares to WWE. And another example I do want to add that is more new school was AJ Styles. He, was Impact Wrestling till the day he died. He went to New Japan, went to Ring of Honor, had a successful run over there, and really, revived his career. And then the Royal Rumble 2016 happens. AJ Styles becomes a surprise. They don't have him go to NXT, and he, pretty much really did a fantastic job, getting, hot with, the main roster crowd. And, they put him in a WrestleMania program with a veteran like Chris Jericho to start his run. And I think if Kenny Omega is going to come to WWE, the Rumble's probably the best place to have him in there as a surprise. Have him, be in there for, 40 to 50 minutes like AJ Styles was when he debuted back in 2016. And then, you have to put him in a program at WrestleMania with a veteran that, is over with the crowd so that it rubs off Kenny. And then, if you continue to book him hot like they did with AJ Styles, give the man the WWE Championship. And I think he will connect with the audience because of how talented and gifted he is in that ring.
I have another counterpart to that. And I definitely agree. If Kenny Omega comes to WWE, he needs a debut at the Royal Rumble.
Royal Rumble's the best place.
I don't see how they could do it any other way. All right. But I have another counterpart to say. And I don't want people to misconstrue it. I don't want people to think that, I'm totally just, disregarding everything you're saying. I'm not. I'm really not. AJ Styles, I feel like, was a different story though, because TNA and Impact, though they never had like huge ratings, he spent close to 12, 11 years on television weekly. You know what I mean? Having fire matches with guys like Samoa Joe and Christopher Daniels.
Don't forget legends like Sting and Kurt Angle too that were a part of TNA. Christian Cage.
Exactly. Kenny Omega, the broadest audience he's had is AEW the last 3-4 years. So again, that's a little bit different because AJ had all that time. Plus, he was like a jobber pretty much, but he did have time in WCW. He did do a bunch of dark matches for WWE before going to Impact. But he had all those years on TV weekly. Like you said, when Impact had to deal with Spike TV, that was the same station that Raw was on several years prior. You know what I mean? So they did have somewhat of a big audience.
There's something I do want to add to that. You do make a very valid point here. And like, I don't think, a lot of people can throw what you're saying under the rug. And I think you understand where I'm coming from as well, which is, creating great conversation here. But I do think you're right, because with Spike TV, when TNA was on TV, a lot of people, forget the fact that TNA would pull 2-3 million viewers a week. And, the numbers were hot, and AEW has not reached 2 million. Yeah. So you do make a very valid point, what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I think with Kenny Omega, with how talented he is, you book it properly, it can work. And I think that with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, I just see them making the transition already, because AEW, there has been a lot of backstage drama. And I think at first, as EVPs with Cody, it worked because Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks, they had different visions, but they were able to coincide and work together to create the vision for AEW. And I think what's going to happen, the Young Bucks and Kenny, when, their contracts are up, they're going to transition to WWE because they have unfinished business in, their careers, because you have to realize as EVPs, they can't reach that full potential because they have to put over their own talent so that their own talent can, connect with the audience and, get the viewership. Like with, Cody and MJF. Cody had to put MJF over so that, MJF can reach his full potential. And the Young Bucks, in the beginning of their AEW run, they put over tag teams like Private Party because they needed to, try to get them over with the crowd. And I think with Kenny and the Young Bucks, they have to think about their own careers. And there's one thing that's not checked off their list. They've done everything, but they have not been in WWE. And I'm sure
Yeah.
the Young Bucks, they would love to have a match with the New Day. I bet they would love to have, a match with the Usos. Kenny Omega probably would love to, have another match with AJ Styles and Finn Balor.
Yeah, like I said, can I see them going to WWE? Yes, of course I can. I can see anybody going to WWE. That's like, not so much anymore because there's other options. But back even so much as like maybe like 2008, 2009. Like if you were a pro wrestler, like your entire goal was to get to WWE at some point.
Yeah.
I do feel like that's sort of lost in transition over the last couple of years, especially with like, as popular as wrestling. I feel like just even though the ratings don't showcase it, I feel like every single year pro wrestling becomes more popular.
I
Like,
agree.
you have access to New Japan now. You have access to Ring of Honor now. You have access to Impact. You can sign up for their YouTube like $3 a month and you can watch all their weekly shows and stuff like that.
Streaming services like Impact Plus
It's just
and,
so
the
much.
Otter Club.
It's so much easier to digest it all nowadays.
Mhm.
My worry is having Kenny Omega come to WWE, having the Young Bucks come to WWE, and people being like, "Who the fuck is this? Like, who is this guy?" You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like, I just don't want that to happen. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, I mean, they're so talented. I just don't want people to, disregard them or whatever, especially because they did come from AEW and, the indie scene.
And here's a perfect example too. Carl Anderson. He never went to NXT. He was a New Japan guy, and they had him go right from, New Japan to the main roster. He was with Doc Gallows, and, they somewhat made it work with
Yeah.
him.
But
But
you
I
also,
understand they're bigger. The Young Bucks and Kenny Omega are bigger stars than Carl
yeah.
Anderson.
But like Bronson Reed, bro, he even in the WWE system, NXT Black and Gold, he was a huge star. Did you hear the reactions he used to get when
Yeah.
he won the North American title in that cage match, and everybody was going fucking crazy, and he was crying and so emotional. His wife came, like that was a huge moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, like you said, like the dude barely gets a fucking pop. Like, like so even within the WWE
I
system,
will say
a lot
this.
of people don't get over.
I think Bronson Reed is going to pick up some momentum after this chamber performance. He's going to do some
Bro,
crazy spots,
that
and
that
the
that
crowd's
dude
going to
is,
start reacting slowly to him.
people can think I'm crazy. That dude is so fucking talented, man. And
Dude, they
he
just
is
need
a
to give
champ.
him. They need to give the man a mouthpiece. That's what they really need to do for Bronson Reed,
He
because the man is a force in the ring, and like he has the ability, to be a dominant force in WWE.
and
But I just think that there's little things that they have to do and tweak and adjust to him
yeah.
so that he can get to that level.
And backstage on Raw, I don't know if you saw it. It was a once. I don't know if it's gonna be like a recurring thing or whatever. But he sort of kind of reminded me of like Andrade a little bit. Like he was dressed in a suit, had his hair slicked back, had fucking nice ass shades. So
Mhm.
I don't know if that was just what he was wearing that day, or if that's gonna be a recurring thing to where he's all dressed snazzy and then he
Honestly,
goes
they
out and
should
whoops
book
ass.
him.
Like,
Honestly, they should book him like they tried doing with Rikishi in the Attitude Era when they had him
mhm,
turn heel. You should
yeah.
like do an angle, like have like one of their like most popular guys get like run over by a car, and then Bronson Reed's the one that did it. That would
That'd be awesome.
work. But now
That'd be
back to
awesome.
Kenny
But I
Omega.
I feel like it's a different time though. It's like, I don't
Yeah, I
know. I
know.
don't know how
No, I
people
agree.
would like that, you know,
Yeah.
certain situations that have happened recently.
Yeah. So the thing is, back to, Kenny Omega to WWE. I just see it happening. The Young Bucks and Kenny, going to WWE when their contracts are up, making the transition. I think a lot of these day one AEW guys, MJF probably will make the transition.
Mhm.
And I think that AEW, Tony Khan, they're going to go into a rebuild mode. I think that he's going to get like solid EVPs, like, legends. I think Jericho, like if he retires, Jericho probably could be an EVP. I
Oh,
could
definitely.
see Jeff Jarrett, getting a promotion,
Moxley.
Moxley. So, like, guys, AEW, they have people that are going to stay. I think, they have enough legends to, pretty much get into an EVP role and, help Tony Khan, steer AEW into the right direction. And I think AEW, they're going to keep CM Punk. I don't see CM Punk, going back to WWE. And I
No.
think that's going to be a big thing that's going
Did
to,
you see, don't mean to cut you off. Did you see Chris Jericho's tweet recently?
I
So,
did.
he was like, "I loved working with CM Punk."
Yeah.
That doesn't really sound like the Jericho that
I'm
called
telling
him
you,
a
CM Punk
cancer.
behind closed doors, he worked things out with them.
I've been saying that
I
all
don't think
along.
the Elite and CM Punk are best buddies. I think they're just, mutual right now. And I
They
think
they coulda
later
probably did
on, what's
this,
going to come
bro.
out, in my opinion, and this is not 100% confirmed, this is my opinion, Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks will go to WWE. CM Punk will stay in AEW. And I just see, the Young Bucks and Kenny just, there's going to be more drama in AEW because of them being EVPs and, being performers as well. And
Mhm.
I just see AEW going into a new direction once the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega leave. And I think it might actually help Tony Khan and AEW, rebuild and focus on their homegrown talent, which is something that they really need to do.
If that very well could happen, man. Like I said, I can see them going to WWE. I just don't want them to get lost in the shuffle and, not get over because half the audience
Of
doesn't know who
course.
the fuck they are. 98% of the audience that watches AEW, they don't watch WWE and vice versa. So I guarantee you a lot of the audience in WWE, they don't know anything about Kenny Omega or the Bucks. You know what I mean?
And I think here's one of my quick takes that I'm gonna say on this, and I'm gonna leave it as this. I do think Kenny Omega will have a better WWE run than the Young Bucks will. And I think the Young Bucks, they're going to be best known for the work they've done outside of WWE. I could see them winning tag titles in WWE, but like we all know, they don't care as much about the tag teams in WWE than they
Mhm.
do outside of, World Wrestling Entertainment.
Yeah, exactly.
I do see Kenny Omega transitioning very well. I do see
I mean,
that.
I could see the Young Bucks going against the Usos. I could see them going against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I could see him going against New Day,
FTR when they come
FT,
back.
FTR. I could see him going against the Viking Raiders. Like, there's a lot of tag teams like Drew
And they work
McIntyre
with
and
a lot of these guys.
Sheamus.
And remind you, they've worked with, the Viking Raiders and Ring of Honor. So
Yeah.
it's possible. Their friends are also in WWE as well. And I think
Maybe,
we're really going to see guys from both companies transition within the
may-
next, 3 to 5
maybe
years.
everybody's talking about how dead the WWE tag division is. Maybe the Young Bucks is what WWE needs to sort of rejuvenize it.
I think so. And a lot of, WWE casual fans are kids. Young Bucks are very flashy. And, they have gotten over having their own shirts at
Bro,
Hot Topic and stuff. They're going to
bro,
connect with the kids.
the Young Bucks versus the Street Profits.
That could happen. Yeah.
The crazy shit that Montez Ford does. Are you kidding me? Oh my fucking god. Anybody that watches this, if you're a WWE fan and not an AEW fan, do research on the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega before that transition happens, because you're missing out on a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
That's all
And
I
that's
gotta
the
say.
thing I want to say as well before we move on to our last, extra for this episode. A lot of people are going to say this when Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks leave. AEW's going to die. AEW's dead. They're going to go out of business, this and that. AEW is not going anywhere anytime soon. They are still going to be, I think a part of, TBS and TNT. I think that they're doing an incredible job, with the ratings for like, in 2023, like the ratings that they are reaching are, okay. And I definitely see AEW not really going anywhere. They have the brand. They have a great diehard, fan base that will do anything, for them. And Tony Khan, he has a lot of money. His
Yeah.
dad is the owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars in the NFL and a soccer team as well. They're
Mhm.
not going anywhere anytime soon, but when the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega do leave, in my opinion, AEW will go into a rebuild mode, which I think will benefit them 3 to 5 years when that rebuild begins. Because WWE, you have to realize when WCW beat them for 82 weeks, they went into rebuild mode. They started establishing and creating their own stars like Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H, Mankind. And then, 82 weeks later, they were more over than Hollywood Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash. And they started, beating them in the ratings. WWE and TNA, AEW, all these promotions, they are always at their best when they're establishing their own superstars.
And I always say this whenever I get into an argument on a fucking with a mark on social media. I always
Love
say
doing that.
I wrestling fans, like, no offense to anybody that watches us, but there's a lot of wrestling fans that are fucking just plain right stupid. You know what I mean? But I always say AEW is pro wrestling and WWE is sports entertainment. There's a huge difference. You know what I mean?
Big difference. I do agree with you on that.
All right, let's move on to the next topic, man. We have Elimination Chamber to get ready for.
That's right. So, the next thing that we are going to be talking about is Carmelo Hayes potentially being a new member of the Hurt Business. So, according to these reports, pretty much Carmelo Hayes has been impressing WWE with his dark matches that he's been doing on Main Event before, Raw and SmackDown. And they want to add him to the Hurt Business, according to some of these reports. How do you feel about that, Danny? I feel like I'm going to agree with your take.
I think that'd be great, and I think I even
Ooh,
even before this report came out, I think I mentioned that because they're trying to rebuild the Hurt Business. I would much rather Carmelo Hayes be involved than Omos. You know what I mean? Because think of all the tag matches and all the single matches we could have. I mean, I could see say Cedric Alexander's injured. He can't compete, but they want to put Shelton in a tag team match. Imagine Shelton Benjamin and Carmelo Hayes in a tag team match against the Street Profits, Viking. Usos. I don't fucking know. I mean, I think that'd be a good move, and it'll give him an opportunity to get on the main roster. I'm not saying he has to stay there forever. Maybe it's only a couple months, and he's, maybe it's almost like going to be like a Sami Zayn situation to where, maybe Bobby Lashley is, pressing his buttons, trying to make him do stuff that he doesn't want to do. Carmelo Hayes is like, fuck you. He can go off and do his own single shit. But I think just to get him on the main roster, to get him recognizable, just like they did with Randy Orton with Evolution, and as well as Batista, put him in that mold, get him in front of the audience. I mean, is there a better way to get this guy on the main roster than having him in a faction with fucking Bobby Lashley?
Wow. I gotta say, that's a great take, and here's my take on Carmelo Hayes to the main roster. And I think that this is the best way to, describe it. And here's my take. So, you have two options. You either play it safe, put Carmelo Hayes in the Hurt Business to let him, slowly, work his way up in the main roster, kind of like what they did with Solo Sikoa in the Bloodline. Or you can take a chance, you can bet on Carmelo Hayes' talent and have him, by himself doing his thing and, doing it, the natural way, trying to get over with the audience and, bet on his talent. And that's a little bit more risky than putting him in the Hurt Business. And if I was booking Carmelo Hayes on the main roster, at first, going into this topic, I thought Carmelo Hayes, he's too much of a star to be by himself. Or no, I thought that he was too much of a star to be in a faction, like the Hurt Business. And I thought that he can, succeed on his own. But with WWE, continuing to bring people back and, you have a hungry group of, superstars training to be, the next big superstars in the Performance Center and NXT, and more people Triple H is bringing onto the main roster, it becomes more risky having him do that. And I love Carmelo Hayes. I love Bron Breakker. I love Grayson Waller. I love a lot of these guys that are, a part of Shawn Michaels NXT.
Mm-hmm.
And I am a huge fan of Carmelo Hayes. I followed his work since Northeast Wrestling and independent work as Christian Casanova. And the moment I first saw him was back in 2018 at a Northeast Wrestling show in Poughkeepsie, New York. He was competing in this ladder match, and I knew immediately this kid's going to be a star. And honestly, with the main roster in NXT, being completely different crowds, because you have the hardcore fans in NXT and you have, the casuals on WWE.
Yeah.
I think if I was Triple H, I would play it safe, put him in the Hurt Business, and, give him that solid push. And when the time is right, have him turn on Bobby Lashley and, really focus on the main event scene. Because what I see happening with the Hurt Business, here's what I see happening. You have Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander. They're going to be the tag team champions.
Yeah.
Then you have Omos, who's going to be the big guy for the group. You have MVP, who's going to be the manager of the group. And Bobby Lashley as WWE or Universal Champion. Because there's big plans for Bobby Lashley in this Triple H, regime. The reports, came out a few months ago that they're very high on the Hurt Business and they really want to, take them to that next level. They should have never broke up. You're absolutely right. Don't fix something that's not broken. But there is one title that is missing, and that's the United States or Intercontinental Champion. And I think if there's somebody that can make one of those championships so prestigious, Carmelo Hayes fits that role. And I think what better way to have the Hurt Business, what better way to have Carmelo Hayes than put him in this group, the Hurt Business, have them all hold the titles that are on either Raw or SmackDown, whatever brand they go to after WrestleMania. And then when the time is right, Carmelo Hayes could turn on Lashley and try to get the WWE Championship.
You know what I kind of would be really interested to see?
We saw it with Randy and Batista in Evolution.
We've only ever seen Bobby Lashley and the Hurt Business on Raw, I believe. They never made the transition over to SmackDown. I would have them form the group, and I would have them all go to SmackDown. I would love to see the Hurt Business feud with the Bloodline before. Obviously, I don't. That's a little far fetched. I think the Bloodline is over after WrestleMania. But I mean, think of the battles we could have, bro. Imagine MVP and fucking Paul Heyman just talking shit to each other. That'd be entertaining in itself.
Yeah. Here's what I think now. The Hurt Business and Judgment Day, when they do the brand split, keep them two factions on opposite brands. Let the Judgment Day do their thing on one brand. Let the Hurt Business do their thing on the other brand. Yeah. And I really think Carmelo Hayes to the Hurt Business, I would love that for him. Great way to, dip his toes onto the main roster. And we've seen it with Solo Sikoa. He was a great talent in NXT. But what this man has done for the Bloodline has really brought him to a whole nother level. And now people are comparing Solo Sikoa to Umaga. And he, I think, the way they dipped his toes in there, having him screw Drew McIntyre at Clash at the Castle was a great way to, bring some momentum to the Bloodline because, of course, Roman Reigns being champion and the Usos being champion for so long, it's going to get repetitive after a while. And I remember in our predictions video for Clash at the Castle, you, me, and Ben, we were sick and tired of Roman Reigns being champion, and we wanted Drew McIntyre to have that moment. But then when they brought in Sami Zayn and Solo Sikoa, it kind of brought back the excitement, for the Usos and Roman Reigns, which is why, a lot of us now, we have an even bigger payoff at WrestleMania.
Yep. Well, like I said, if Solo Sikoa didn't end up going and joining the Bloodline when he did, and he just came to the main roster.
Veer Mahan situation.
Yeah, it wouldn't. People would be like, "Who the hell is this guy? Like, where'd he come from? Just a random nobody." But the fact that they did pair him up with the Usos and Roman Reigns, 3 guys, and Paul Heyman, 4 guys
And
that
Sammy.
have had. Well, yeah, but Sammy wasn't technically with the Bloodline, was he?
Yeah,
No, he
he
was.
was.
Sammy, I can't believe Sammy joined the Bloodline before Solo Sikoa. I forgot about that. But if they didn't put him with the Bloodline when he did, with Sami Zayn, Roman Reigns, the Usos, Paul Heyman, guys that have already had long established careers, I feel like Solo Sikoa would have been dead in the water. I don't want the same.
Exactly.
I don't want the same thing with Carmelo Hayes. Put him with the Hurt Business. Allow him to soak up like a sponge all the knowledge that these guys have.
A solid 6 months to a year.
6 months to a year, man, and then like I said, Bobby Lashley's pushing his buttons, trying to order him around, boss him around. He's sick of that shit. And we have another Sami Zayn turning on Roman Reigns situation. And
And
it
that's gonna
allows
lead to a
Carmelo
bigger payoff.
it gives Carmelo Hayes the momentum he needs to have a successful solo career. That's what needs to happen, bro. It's the best way to
Well
have it happen.
said. And I 100% agree with you on your take. You couldn't have said it any better. Carmelo Hayes, it's like you saw Solo Sikoa, they put him in the Bloodline. Don't fix something that's not broken. And you have a very talented guy in Carmelo Hayes, just like Solo Sikoa. You put him in a faction like the Hurt Business, it's going to put him over. And we've seen it on NXT, the potential Carmelo Hayes has. And I think, even the people that don't watch NXT that have paid attention to it will say Carmelo Hayes, that kid's going to be a star. But now we have to see how WWE is going to book him. And what better way than to put him in the situation with the Hurt Business? Cedric Shelton, tag team champions, Carmelo Hayes, Intercontinental, Bobby Lashley, Universal or WWE champion, depending on what brand they're on. I think it would really, put him over and really help him evolve. Because The Rock, before we had the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, The Rock, when he first got called up to the main roster as Rocky Maivita, it didn't work out. They put him in the faction, Nation of Domination. And that, took off so good to where Carmelo Hayes, that could be another situation. He could take Bobby Lashley out like The Rock took Farouk out of the Nation.
I have a little bit of a hot I have a little bit of a hot take, man. I don't feel like The Rock has always somewhat been over. I don't feel like he was that over when it was with the Nation Domination. It wasn't until he went on the singles run
from
Yeah,
Nation
but
of Domination.
he wasn't over, I don't feel like he was that over compared to when he went on the singles runs, I just didn't really care for The Rock and Nation of Domination. He just from what I remember,
Yeah,
he
but
didn't
here's
really
the
get
thing,
that
Danny.
much
I'm
reaction.
gonna add something to that real quick. Sorry for interrupting. You have to understand, with Rocky Maivita, there was no crowd reaction
Oh, when he
whatsoever.
came out with them fucking tassels at Survivor Series 96, I believe it was, 96, 97.
But now you go look back at, WWE Network, some of the work. When he was a part of the Nation of Domination, he was getting reactions because the crowd would chant Rocky, Rocky, and like he turned himself from Rocky Maivita to The Rock. And he was starting to connect with the audience slowly but surely. That was him dipping his toes in. Then, of course, the Nation, they disband. And then The Rock, joins Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon and, wins the WWF championship.
He was
And
getting
that's where he started to, get even bigger.
He was getting a lot of heat around that time because the fans hated Vince McMahon and, because obviously everybody was a Stone Cold mark back in the day. So Stone Cold, every chance he got, he would stun McMahon. So McMahon knew how to get some heat. And the fact that The Rock joined up with the McMahons,
and
like he was getting a lot of heat around that time, man. He was a really good heel. And then obviously that was around the time that Jericho debuted. Jericho actually interrupted The Rock on his debut night.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, this situation could be similar to The Rock. They put The Rock in the Nation of Domination. That was him dipping his toes in the water. And then, he became one of the top heels in, the business. And then they did some stuff with Mankind and Mick Foley, and that's where, he became one of the top baby faces in the business. I think Carmelo Hayes really has the potential. I see him and Braun Breaker the next 10 years being the top guys in WWE. I seriously see it. But
I
we'll
could definitely
definitely
see
have
it
to wait
too.
and see what
But
happens.
like I said, like I've maybe Batista would have, but I don't think Randy Orton would have been as over as he would have been if he did not join up with Triple H and Ric
No,
Flair.
Batista needed it, I think, more than Randy Orton. They both needed it equally, I think.
Yeah, but I feel like with Batista's build, he would have been somewhat of a star regardless. Randy Orton, I feel like he would have got lost in the shuffle a little
Yeah,
bit.
but with Batista, man, I don't think he would have ever won a world championship because he had that
I don't
big
know.
WrestleMania 21 moment, and I don't think anything could have been bigger than that for
Yep.
him in his career.
But I mean, that's what needs to happen to Carmelo Hayes, man. You need to get him in a faction with guys that have long established careers,
Mhm.
you know. I
And
mean,
don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Carmelo Hayes is not a star because
he's
I
a
was
star,
reading.
but not
No,
to the mainstream WWE audience.
look. Here's what I want to say because I have seen, a lot of wrestling fans out there, pretty much say, "Oh, Carmelo Hayes, he's a star. He doesn't need the Hurt Business." But you have to consider the transition. We've seen a lot of transitions fail from
Yep.
NXT to the main roster, and we all know Carmelo Hayes is a star, but he needs to be seen with the bigger audience. And instead of throwing him into the Sharks, why don't you have some Sharks with him so that he can, pretty much go from being a baby
Because
shark to, the head shark?
because regardless, bro, if
That's such a shitty take.
oh my god, Baby Shark. My
Oh,
daughter
God.
loved that shit when she was a kid. But if you put Carmelo Hayes with the Hurt Business, bro, and they're getting a lot of heat, man. You know, obviously they're a heel faction. He's gonna get a reaction just because he's with them, and that'll carry on. You know what I mean? And then it'll be a huge payoff once he smashes a steel chair over Bobby Lashley's head or whatever, and takes out Shelton and Cedric at some point. Like that'd be a huge, bro. Everybody be behind him.
I got one final thing, too, I'll say about this
One
real
final
quick.
thing, man, and then let's wrap up and get out of here.
I
We will be
agree.
live for Elimination Chamber in a couple hours, man. Just don't forget that.
7:45 Eastern Standard Time. My last thing I'm going to say, too, we all knew Seth Rollins. We all knew Dean Ambrose, John
Yep.
Moxley, and Roman Reigns. We
Yep.
knew that how talented they were. If you watched FCW and you watched NXT, you were a fan of them. And instead of, throwing them into the Sharks, they put the three together and formed the Shield. And it really, elevated Seth Rollins to a world champion. It elevated Dean Ambrose into a world champion and Roman Reigns into becoming one of the biggest stars in the business right now.
Yeah, people forget that it wasn't until they went up into the main roster that they became the Shield. People assume that they were teaming up when they were in NXT, and that wasn't the case. It wasn't
But
until
you
they got
see
brought up
here,
to the main roster. And
Carmelo Hayes,
at
it's
first,
perfect to put him in the Hurt Business.
At first, the Shield got brought in to be like ironically enough, CM Punk's bodyguard. Remember that?
Yep, I do. And the best thing to leave it at is Carmelo Hayes to the Hurt Business. I think especially him and MVP, I could definitely see a lot of chemistry there.
Yep. And
With
like,
both, because Carmelo Hayes is like a young MVP. What he's doing on NXT is literally how they booked MVP's SmackDown debut in 06.
Yeah, he came in as like a retired sports star or something like that. Remember, he was sitting
Because
in the audience all the
Carmelo,
time.
he takes a lot of the sports stuff and adds it into his, character.
Yeah.
I
just feel like
there's no better way to put him on the main roster than the Hurt Business.
Carmelo Hayes can learn a lot from those guys, bro. He can learn a lot.
I think we really hit the nail on the head on this one. And if people still think Carmelo Hayes does not need the Hurt Business, then they're just delusional.
Because people that watch Raw and SmackDown, they're not watching NXT every week. They don't know who the fucking guy is. They may see clips on YouTube or social media every once in a while. They don't know
2
who
million
the fuck
viewers versus 600,000 viewers.
You gotta put him with established superstars to help him get over, to help guide him, and to help mold him into being a main event guy. That's what needs to fucking happen, man. Mic drop. Let's get the fuck out of here.
If you let us know in the comment section below how you guys feel about Kenny Omega to WWE and Carmelo Hayes to the Hurt Business. Let us know how you feel in the comment section below. Or if you want to just wait until the Elimination Chamber to talk about it, we can talk about it there. But if you guys enjoyed this extra before the Elimination Chamber, make sure to smash that like button now. If you're not a We Are Wrestling Maniac yet already, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. If you have not had a chance to watch the latest episode of the We Are Wrestling podcast, Danny, Ben, and myself, we sat down and we talked about some of our favorite moments within, the first year of doing the talk show together. And I recommend you guys to go check that out if you haven't seen it. And, links down in the description below. You can go support Danny and I and our other YouTube channels and stuff, all that down below. And, of course, to all the We Are Wrestling Maniacs out there worldwide, Elimination Chamber, watch along, 7:45 Eastern Standard Time. Ben, Danny, and myself will be there. If you want to talk to us and watch the show with us, we'll be there. But to all the We Are Wrestling Maniacs, we are taking over. Peace.